everyone, this is Anna from Savvy Cat Realty, and today I'm going to talk to you about the 2023 real estate market trends in Portugal and my opinion and projections on the possibility of a crash. So this video is also going to be in reply and using partially the video that Josh from Expat Everywhere did about the article from Value of Stocks that was published back in September, and that got everyone in a panic because it deemed Portugal as the most likely real estate market to crash in 2023. So Josh did a very good overview and simplification of the facts that are mentioned on that article, and go check his video out to see the data in more detail, as he does expose it very nicely. I'm just going to talk about the main topics and give you some extra insight about how things actually are as someone that is a Portuguese person, a Portuguese resident, and a real estate expert. So the first thing that of course is a relevant factor towards this whole scenario is supply and demand. So at the moment, the numbers of demand in Portugal are not going down at all. So the rising trend of immigration from wealthy countries to Portugal is rising. It's not going down, and it has been showing absolutely no signs of slowing down. Very much on the opposite. Every year, the numbers have been going up. And this is also leading to a whole scenario with the self-services, but that's something for another video. Another thing that I would like to mention is the state of the rental market, which is bad right now. So I would say that at the moment Portugal is having a rental crisis. There is way more demand than offer almost everywhere. There are of course some locations that are a bit better, but in general there is way more people looking to rent than there is rental property available on the market. And this is pretty much leading to bidding wars and extremely unsustainable rises in prices. The rental market prices have shooted up in an absolutely crazy way. Like in a year, prices have doubled and tripled in certain locations. And this is not sustainable for locals, but the demand from expats that are able to pay these amounts is so high that we are having this real estate rental crisis where the prices are pretty much on a bidding system, and whoever pays the most gets it. And I'm not even talking about very fancy property. I'm talking about everything. It's very, very hard to find rentals in Portugal right now. And Lisbon being the worst example. There are people that are literally bidding a year rent and overpaying in order to close the apartments in Lisbon. This is very unsustainable. Thankfully, on the buying side of things, it's not as bad. We are not having bidding wars, but we are not seeing the prices coming down either. So overall, what I'm seeing is demand isn't coming down, and from the numbers and trends I've been watching, it doesn't seem that it will. So the next thing that is mentioned on that article and Josh video is the high housing stock that we have in Portugal, and the high number of dwellings per inhabitants. And like he said, this can be attributed to inheritance situations. So here in Portugal, it is fairly common that certain families, especially the wealthier families, have a lot of real estate investments, and they keep them within the families. But as things pass down, you have the inheritance. So I am very good person to talk about that because I've had literally experienced that with my family. So I have two very big real estate investors in the family, one on my father's side and one on my mother's side. And on my father's side, my father has already passed away, so I'm already in the middle of it. And people didn't divide the property. So we have, like, let's say 10 properties that belong to everyone instead of 2 properties that belong to each person, let's say. And this creates a huge mess when it comes to actually taking care of the property. So the people inheriting don't come to an agreement regarding if they're willing to spend on it, to get it renovated, how much they're willing to spend, if they're willing to change rents, if they're willing to get people out, if they're willing to sell, how much they're willing to sell it for. And we have a lot of this scenario in Portugal. It's very annoying, and it's very much due to the one of the reasons that is listed further down, that is the lack of financial literacy in Portugal. So people don't have a tendency not to manage things in general, and it creates this problem. So and this is also related to the reason and the fact that a lot of houses in Portugal sit empty. Some of them due to this scenario, and some of them because people are simply not willing to rent, because it comes at a high risk, and the taxes are high, and the protections aren't the best. So just recently things changed a bit, because before you didn't have this system, but right now the system is slightly better. So what you have right now regarding rentals is that if someone stops paying on the first month, you can give them a warning. On the second month, if they still don't pay, you give them a second warning. And on the third month, if they still don't pay, you give the 2 warnings to the police, and you can request to kick them out. However, there is a but here, and that but is if those persons have nothing to lose, they can refuse to get out. And if they refuse to get out, they will be incurring on a criminal record, and they will be at risk of getting things pawned. But if they have nothing to lose, they can just squat in the property, and the legal process to get things treated, they can just squat in the property, and the legal process to get them out is painfully slow and not cheap. So we have a situation like that going on right now, and they have not been paying rent for about 3 years now. And we had to pay 2,000 euros to get the process going in court on top of the lawyer fees. And it's still going. That process has still not been closed. So one of the big problems here in Portugal is lack of accountability and how terribly the legal system works. There was a survey done not too long ago that stated that 80% of the Portuguese people do not trust the legal system. And it's because it is just not efficient. It's way too slow, it's way too bureaucratic, it's way too expensive, and it's understaffed. So we have a lot of problems regarding accountability and enforcing things, and that definitely makes some landlords become very uncomfortable with the renting, and there is a lot of people that live abroad and just have a second home in Portugal that they don't rent even if they don't use, because they don't want to deal with all these issues. So you will see a lot of empty property, and this also adds up to the rental crisis that I was talking about in the beginning of the video. So the next problem is the second homes and the Airbnbs and alojamento local. So here in Portugal you have 2 rental regimes. You have the alojamento local, that is basically holiday rentals, and you have the long-term rental regime. The tax isn't that different, but of course you can get a lot more profits on the holiday homes because you can charge a lot higher prices. So the holiday rentals became extremely popular, especially in central locations and touristic cities, and started overtaking the market. And this happened especially on the Algarve and Lisbon, and a bit in Porto, but it wasn't as bad, where we started seeing people basically kicking out their long-term rentals in order to turn things into Airbnbs and extremely inflating the prices in these locations. So this can be an issue. What was mentioned is the fact that we don't know the amount of second homes that exists. This is actually not that simple because in Portugal it is pretty hard to get a second loan on property. So if you have a loan on a property, you usually can ask for a second one until you finish paying the first, unless both loans together stay under the desired effort rate. So here in Portugal you have a system to define whether or not the credits are sustainable. That is the effort rate. The effort rate is calculated based on the income of the household. So if you are applying for a loan as a couple, as a married couple, both the incomes will count. The mortgage monthly installment has to be under 35% of those incomes. So that's the effort rate. So here in Portugal you always try to keep the effort rate before 35%, and the data from the Bank of Portugal tells us that over 85% of mortgages in Portugal have under 25% effort rates. So they are still quite low in comparison to the incomes of the families. But of course, with the variable rates, this can change. But we will go to that in a bit. So the next factor that was mentioned was the price rise. And this is one of the factors that bothers me the most, because it is this price rise, this unsustainable price rise that happened in Portugal, is very much due to the way that the real estate market operates. So here in Portugal you have a very under-regulated real estate market, and the state doesn't even know how many people there are selling houses, because the agencies, the companies can share their license with their employees, and they have no obligation to say how many people they are sharing it with. And there is no control on whether these people are being trained or not, which leads also to the fact that a lot of people selling real estate are very underqualified, and the standard model here in Portugal is the selling model. So by standard, real estate agencies make contracts with the sellers of property, the owners, and the standard commission is 5%. However, because the Portuguese people very much mistrust real estate agencies, they do not give them exclusivity. It is very rare for a Portuguese person to give exclusivity to a real estate agencies, because generally they have absolutely terrible reputation in Portugal, and the Portuguese people don't trust them and find that the more people selling it, the better. But this creates an extremely competitive environment, because basically the agents only get paid if they are the ones who sell, so they are constantly trying to withhold information from other parties in order to not get their sale taken away. And they also are very pressured to be very commercial and close the sale as fast as possible, even if that sacrifices the due diligence. And of course they are incentivized as a seller agency, and as a seller the goal is to sell the property as high as possible. And you have absolutely no control on that in Portugal. So you can list a property for whatever price you want with absolutely no justification. You have no access to the previous sale prices of that property or of their area unless you're a licensed real estate agent and you share that information with your clients, which 90% of the agencies do not. So buyers that come from foreign countries and do not know our economy and our system are constantly overpaying for property. And this is also something that is mentioned in the video, is that foreign investors tend to pay 70% more for property than Portuguese people. And this is due to this factor that I was just mentioning, but also due to the requirements of these people. So often foreign investors have much stricter requirements for property than Portuguese people. Portuguese people are used to the Portuguese bad construction and usually prefer to pay less than to have more quality, while foreign investors tend to prefer to pay more and have more quality. So that is also a factor, but I would say it's a very rampant problem that often real estate foreign investors are misled by agencies and sellers and overpay unknowingly. And that is the main reason why the drastic price rise in Portugal happened. So the under-regulation of the Portuguese system and the lack of representation of buyers. Buyers become very misinformed and make misinformed purchases. And this is very much the reason that I started this company, is exactly because I do not agree with this, and one of the places where this is worse is, like I was saying, the Algarve and Lisbon, and I've lived in the Algarve for about 3 years and I bought property there. And it is a very obvious problem in the Algarve. Like when I bought property in 2016 or 17, I can't remember right now, I bought a 2-bedroom penthouse apartment, new property, still within the construction guarantee, for 140k in a new build. Right now, that same property is probably worth 300k. This is not a sustainable rise, and this has happened due to misinformed buyers to the most. Of course, the prices would always rise due to supply and demand, but the speed of this rise is very much due to the lack of control on the real estate market and the lack of representation of buyers. So, the next things that were mentioned on the article and are explained on Josh's video is the factors that lead Portugal to become the most likely one to have a real estate crash is the increase on credits. And this one I absolutely agree with, that is a problem. So both the amount of increase of credits that happened in the last few years, there was a 700 increase on credits according to the data that was supplied, and the fact that the big majority of these credits were on variable rate. And on this particular case, I very much think that the banks are to blame. They very much knew what they were doing, while like it also already has been said, the Portuguese population in general is fairly financially illiterate. So if they see something that is cheaper, they will go for it without giving it a second thought. And although the market, the mortgages and the house credits are quite controlled, like I was saying, that cannot be said by product credits and car credits and smaller credits of the such. So it is very common for Portuguese families to buy a house on credit and then buy the car on credit and buy the TV on credit. And usually they don't really think about the amount of money they are owing, and they'll just keep accumulating these small credits until they have a very big problem. But regarding the mortgages themselves and the possibility of their crash coming due to bank property repossession flooding the market, I personally believe that is very unlikely. So like I was mentioning before, there is 70 and over 80% of the Portuguese credits are under 27% effort rate, and also over 80%, I have those numbers written on the article link here, but also over 80% are under 470 euros. So the amounts of the credits are actually fairly low. And although this variation on the Euribor that has been absolutely brutal is definitely a problem and will make a lot of families struggle, I believe that a big majority of them will be able to overcome, because it will be mostly installments coming from 400 euros to 600 euros, which sure, it's a big increase, it's a 50% increase. But 200 euros per month is something that you can mostly find by doing extra hours or taking a part-time job or making an extra effort. So it's not like the majority of the credits will be going from 1,000 to 1,500, which is something a lot less likely to be able to cover. So taking that factor, I don't believe that there will be enough houses coming into the market to generate a crash. And the credit protections that were also mentioned in Josh's video and the article, the Portuguese government has made protections in order to avoid this crashes scenario. So when the COVID was happening, there was protection of mortgages and protections of people that would, like Josh said, it's pretty much kicking the can down the road. But now that you have the Euribor crisis, the government once again launched the protection, and the increases are capped for low-income families until the end of the year. The fact is that the Portuguese banks, and as someone who works with real estate and mortgages, and I have a lot of clients working with mortgages, and I keep in touch with banks and I get a lot of information from there, I've been hearing my bank partners say that a lot of houses are going to come into the market for repossessions for the past 3 years. So since 2021, I've been hearing this from the banks, and we barely see any houses coming into the market. So honestly, I'm losing a bit of the credibility in that. And I do believe that there will be some houses coming into the market, but the very few that actually do disappear with the same, not the same, but disappear in the blink of an eye because of the demand on the real estate market. And usually the bank repossessions offer really good conditions and credit conditions and are usually very well priced, so they disappear from the market in a blink. With all the factors seen, I personally think it's very, very unlikely for there to be a crash within the next year. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball to be 100% sure on that, but with the factors that I have, I do think it's unlikely. And this is very much a Portuguese characteristic. Like in Portugal we say we are desenrascados. So desenrascados basically mean we sort it out, we find a way. And this is very much a Portuguese thing that can be a bad thing and a good thing. So we can go back to the credits on this. So I'm going to give you an example that I was just talking with a friend of mine a few weeks ago. We were talking about this whole bank scenario and the problem of the credits and so on. And he was talking about a friend of his that was in this exact scenario. So he purchased a credit with a variable rate, and at the time he chose the variable rate because the fixed rate would be just over the effort rate. So he was pretty much stuck with a variable rate and it went for it. And then a while after, the Euribor rised and his installment rised a lot. So I believe it went from 300 to 600 something euros. It basically doubled, which was bad, of course. But he found a way. Basically, he spent 2 or 3 years doing a lot of extra hours and basically having a lot of a harder life in order to sustain that. But he did keep paying it, and then the Euribor had another drastic change. This time it actually lowered below what he initially contracted. So this time his installment went all the way back to lower than what he paid initially. So now he already vanquished that mortgage, already finished paying, so he doesn't no longer have to worry about that. But it's very much an example of how Portuguese people sort this kind of things and deal with this kind of things. And I believe this will probably be a scenario for a lot of Portuguese families. And I think and I hope that the majority of them will be able to keep their houses, because the rental market is even worse than the buying market, and everyone knows that they will not be able to afford a house at the current prices. So I think that the families will all make a very big effort to maintain their houses, and of course not everyone will, but I don't believe that enough will go and get repossessed in order to crush the market. So overall, I think that Portugal will have a stabilization in prices, like not everywhere. We will have some cities that will keep on the rising trend due to supply and demand, but cities that are already at the top of their curve are stabilizing and will keep stabilizing, maybe even have a small decrease. I don't think that it will be a huge decrease at all, but I think that this year will be stable on that aspect. And who knows what 2023 will bring. Let's see how the economy holds up through these times. It's very much a fact that Portugal has very low wages, and this increase has not been proportional to the economy capacity of the Portuguese people at all, which is something I'm very concerned about, and it's driving a lot of people out of their own cities. But like we were saying on the beginning, the demand from foreigners is not going down, so supply and demand is very much what reigns the market, and as long as the supply is high, I don't see anything crashing or coming down. And the data that I've been experienced so far is that supply is not coming down. So I hope that this information is useful. If you are looking to move to Portugal, reach out to us at savvycatrealty.com or at our email contact.savvycatrealty.com. We are locals that mostly operate as buyer agencies, and due diligence is very important to us. Our services include the legal verification, location advisory, and technical verification. Everything is very transparent. You can find all the information on our website, and our goal is to try and decrease gentrification issues as much as possible and get expats to make informed purchases. So do check out all of our free information in our YouTube video and our blog in our website. And I do hope to see you all again next week. If you do, I would love to hear your opinion on this whole 2023 real estate topic, and what do you personally think it will happen. And I will see you all again next week. Bye!